Recording going here.
It seems to be
Right,
coming.
okay, it's fine now. Yep.
So, here we go. Bonjour à tous, ici Paul Ponsott pour un nouveau podcast d'Au-delà de l'illusion. Et aujourd'hui, j'ai le privilège de recevoir à nouveau Andrew Johnson qui va nous parler d'un thème extrêmement important et malheureusement qui est un fléau à l'échelle mondiale. Et c'est le thème du gangstalking. Le gangstalking, c'est c'est véritablement le harcèlement d'individus par magie noire, par des ondes électromagnétiques, par du théâtre de rue. Et Andrew Johnson a reçu un témoignage extrêmement triste et extrêmement important sur le sujet. Et c'est l'analyse d'Andrew Johnson que je voulais vous partager avec vous. Hello all of you, this is Paul Ponsott from Beyond the Illusion, and today I have the privilege of talking again to Andrew Johnson. And Andrew Johnson will be talking about targeted individuals. Now, gang stalking, electronic harassment, or targeting is a worldwide phenomenon, and sadly, it affects, in my opinion, millions of people worldwide. And people can be targeted by directed energy weapons, by basically street theatre, basically when people target them physically in the streets and will insult them and all that, or through occult means such as black magic. And it seems to be multi-leveled with the presence of certain technologies, of certain networks that we'll call the Gladio network that's linked basically to the military industrial complex, the Nazi International, but also there is an aspect of gang stalking that is linked to the non-human presence or to entities that we'll call demons, aliens, whatever you call them. So it's really a multi-leveled problem. Now, I did a couple of podcasts on gang stalking in 2015, 2016. And after talking about that, I was contacted by a lot of people that basically were targeted individuals. And those people were extremely balanced people. They were people that had jobs, that had lives, that had family lives. They were from different age groups. Some were in their 20s, some were in their 70s. A majority of them were women, but there were also men, and they were in every profession, people in the medical profession, people basically that were in all different types of professions, and they were basically saying the same things, that they were being harassed by directed energy weapons, street theatre, and even black magic. So I realized that this phenomenon was extremely widespread. So I got to read a lot of books about it, and there are testimonies from all over the world, and from the US, from the UK, as Andrew will tell us, from South Africa, from Asia, from Brazil. I mean, it's a worldwide phenomenon that affects, in my opinion, millions of people. And hardly anybody talks about it because it's more or less a taboo, and even in the alternative research community, because it's something that targets everyday people in their everyday lives, and it's all connected to basically it's all connected to the same people or the same entities that are behind 9/11. There's the directed energy connection, the occult connection. So we'll go into all that tonight. But first of all, Andrew, how did you get to basically to research the gang stalking phenomenon?
Well, I think, Paul, really it came up initially for me in the area that you already touched on briefly, which is when I was looking at the alien abduction phenomenon, and I think there were things that came out of that which seemed to be very similar to the targeted individuals phenomenon. And then also, as you mentioned, the directed energy technology, which comes up when you research 9/11. If you get to that point, there are also elements of that I'd heard about. But that was where I started to come across these accounts were out there, and so that was going back to like 2004, 2005 timeframe and in between. And I also heard various interviews on Coast to Coast. I think there were several interviews. I remember there was a researcher called Roger Tolsis, yeah, I think that was his name, back about sort of 2006, 2007, who had specialized in helping targeted individuals look, any or try and detect any technology, remote surveillance technology that was being used on them. And, he had various sophisticated equipment like spectrum analyzers and stuff. So, I became aware of that as a thing all those years ago, really. So yeah, that was the sort of background to my understanding and interest in the topic.
And you then received an interview from a musician who contacted you, and you did a very, very good interview of him, and he contacted you basically about his electronic harassment. So could you tell us about that? Because in my opinion, his testimony is extremely important, because he managed to capture the voices.
So this right. So this chap contacted me, Tommy T. I don't know what his second name is. I think his first name is Tommy, as given in the interview, but I'm not 100% sure that's not a pen name that he uses or a musician's name, because I didn't ask him that question. So he contacted me originally about 18 months or a year ago, probably about 18 months ago, because he'd watched some of the videos that Richard D. Hall and I had done, and some of the other videos that I'd done, I think, with other people. And he was very kindly offering me some electronic music that he'd created, because he was a musician and a record and music producer. He'd worked with software to to edit and mix music and so forth. And so he contacted me and said, look, I've written these tracks. I think they'll be appropriate for some of your videos. Would you like to use them? And of course, I said, yes, that's fantastic. Thank you. And a number of the YouTube videos on my channel, about the last sort of 20 or 30, or maybe not that many, but the last since about 2020, have used the music or clip of the music that he gave me. So that's how he introduced himself. It's sort of on an altruistic basis, really. And he kind of seemed to sort of fade into the background a bit. But then he contacted me, I think, I don't know, April, May, June time, something like that, 2022, and said, I think I might be a targeted individual, because I've been hearing these noises, when I go to sleep and when I'm walking around, I get these noises in my ears, and I don't know what they are. And initially, I think they were just bleeps, and clicks, mainly clicks. And then he started to notice a pattern to these, and he also tried to record them, because he could hear them in his ears, but they weren't strongly audible to other people. But I think then he had an instance of other people hearing one of these clicks, while they were sitting near him, and he started to record them. So he sent me these recordings on a Google Drive. And again, for me, it's one of those slightly borderline things. You can hear these clicks, you can hear the recordings, but he's obviously greatly disturbed by these. And so anybody that does listen to these recordings, they're linked on the YouTube video, will find, quite a lot of profanities in there, because he's been annoyed by what's happening to him. Obviously, he's been, he feels he's being targeted with these attacks. But then he also seemed to find that there was a pattern to these noises. There was like some type of coded messages in the clicks, and he also seemed to notice a pattern that when he did certain things, or he said certain things, or even he thought certain things, he would seemingly get some type of response in these clicks. Seemed to be a reaction to whatever he was saying or doing. And so this had gone on for a period of time, and he then decided to contact me. I think this had been going on for 2 or 3. I think he said it had started in April, and I think he contacted me in like July or something. So this had been going on for 2 or 3 months. I mean, it's all in the video. The video is on my YouTube channel, which is Check the Evidence YouTube channel. So I think if you search for that and targeted individual, it should come up. And if anybody can't find it, you can go to checktheevidence.com. and you can go onto the contact form and send me a message, and I'll find it. I mean, Paul will probably link it on the information for this podcast. Yeah, so you should be able to get it there. But anyway, so he then went on to describe some of his background. I mean, he's worked in housing for the local authority in I think he worked in Birmingham and in Liverpool. He explained to me that he does have contacts in Birmingham, in the centre of the UK, and Liverpool, which is in the northwest, and he'd travelled between these two places a fair bit. And that was the curious thing as well, which other targeted individuals have reported, is that even if you move your location, the targeting still seems to follow you. It might change slightly, and there may even be a slight break, but quite often, and I think he essentially described the same sort of thing. However you're being harassed, whether it be with voices in your head or audio artifacts in your hearing, these seem to resume after a period of time of a break. And he reported the same sort of thing. So he does give a number of accounts of this, and of course, he's spoken to various people about it. But he has come to the conclusion that the people that he speaks, for example, his doctor, or the other people in the local council, whoever he speaks to, they know that he is a targeted individual, but of course they don't admit it, or they're told that he is, and they won't give him any more information. They won't tell him who's responsible for this operation. So, and this, I mean, we haven't got onto the gang stalking yet, but this was basically, impinging on his everyday life to the point where it was driving him crazy, so that seems to be the goal of these targeting exercises, to drive the individuals crazy, and, to the point where they might even seek help from, the doctor, because they think they're going mad, so that I think also is an aspect which has come up for Tommy.
Yeah, but and then if they go and seek help, often, as you say, either the doctor won't believe them and they'll be basically labeled insane, or the doctor will know that something's going on but pretend not to believe them, and then give them antidepressants and all that, and to absolutely no avail, because it's an external phenomenon. We're talking about a technological phenomenon, something that's external.
Yes, that's right. And I think the problem is, with a lot of these accounts is only a few of them have, objective evidence, because in the main, obviously, Tommy's recorded some of these sounds, which is, does give some evidence that something has been going on with him. However, even that is very difficult to evaluate, on a sort of fair and level playing field, because you could obviously easily come up with explanations for what these clicks might be, and so that is always the problem with this, that there are other explanations for the experiences of what these these people are having, basically. And I did ask for a video recording of anything that had happened to him that he felt was uh, you know relating to this targeting. And he did say he had recorded something, and he'd taken some pictures. And I did wait a while after I'd done the video, but unfortunately nothing came through from him about further video evidence or pictorial evidence. So I don't know whether he got waylaid, or whether he was warned off, or whether there was some other explanation. But I wasn't able to include that evidence in the video that I posted, unfortunately. Which is not to say that that evidence doesn't exist. It just hasn't been sent to me. Um, so really, you're faced with a lot of these stories, like you've kind of already alluded to, with two possible conclusions. One is that the person really is being targeted through a sophisticated network of organizations, whereby they are able to pass information clandestinely between them, and they seem to, for example, know what he's going to do before he does it, or know what the target is going to do before they do it, and then cause something to happen, like they can make the car not start or something, or they can introduce some other obstacle to their daily life. Or, for example, if they're trying to do some business with the bank to get a loan, or get some money out of the bank, somehow there seems to be this situation where that they have refused the loan, or the money that they're trying to get out of the machine in the wall, it stops working, and there's some kind of random occurrence, like the screen goes blank or something like that, or the card gets swallowed or something like that. And I mean, these are not. I'm saying that, like I said, that's not what Tommy was reporting, but I've heard similar instances whereby it seems that this network is, working in ways that you would not expect it to be able to work, and some very strange things happen. And that, I think, has been the case for Tommy. And then to go to the gang stalking element in the video, for example, he reports that he's been followed, with black cars, and multiple times, and he thinks that he is being, targeted for that reason. He then also reported that he was driving down a motorway, or as you would call it, an auto route, near not too far from where he lives, and somebody drives up alongside him in the other lane and winds down the window, and it's a well-known celebrity who says his name, or makes some face, some gesture or something, which indicated to Tommy that this celebrity, I forget the name of this guy, but it's mentioned in the interview. This guy was part of this targeting network, which sounds unbelievable. But
Well, I've had testimonies like that too.
we know. Sorry.
Yeah, I've had testimonies in France of people being targeted by celebrities. So it seems to corroborate what Tom is saying.
Yeah, that's right. So so you hear, when you hear one of these stories, it sounds unbelievable. But as we've sort of been discussing, when you hear 20 of them with some very common themes between them, you then say, well, what really is going on here? You know, and I think one of the things which has come up in the research, and I think we may have discussed this briefly before, was the research of Carla Turner into the alien abduction phenomenon. And she came to, you know, she died of cancer prematurely. I think she was only like 49 when she died or something, or 44. She wasn't very old. And she's written those books, Masquerade of Angels, and there are a couple of others as well, which are very, very interesting. And why I'm bringing that up is because I think there's some crossover into the targeted individual phenomenon. Is she brings up this idea that whoever is doing this, or the powerful networks that are behind this, seem to kind of create a virtual reality simulation around somebody, and whether the person's consciousness, you know, is influenced with this, and somehow their consciousness is transferred into this virtual reality simulation somehow for a period of time, or whether there's some way of actually surrounding them physically with this virtual reality is not clear. I mean, Carla Turner describes a very interesting incident where, in one of her books, I think one of her witnesses, it might have been herself, goes into a bedroom and sees somebody bathed in this blue light, and it's like they're within this virtual reality simulation while this experience of alien abduction is going on. So, you know, when you hear stories like this, you do wonder exactly what is going on. Is somebody able to transport the targeted individual into this virtual reality simulation and simulate all these experiences? But of course, anybody that's nearby would not experience that because they're not in the civilization. They're either their physical being or their consciousness is not there. And so this person comes out to talk about, you know, being followed, being chased, strange questions, stranger. But the people that are nearby are not in the simulation, so they don't share these memories and these experiences. So, you know, that's one possible explanation that I've thought about. But when you've got physical effects, now Tommy didn't report any lasting physical effects. He didn't. I don't think he reported any marks on his body or anything like that. Then it becomes harder to actually, you know, have any physical evidence of the experience. And we'll really back just with the story, and possibly, like Tommy's got some of the sounds, maybe some video and so forth, and maybe a few pictures. So you know, that again gives one pause for thought. Similarly, I think there is, and you may be able to speak to this as well, Paul, this black helicopter phenomenon is quite common with certain targeted individuals. I think Leah Haley, who's she thought she was an alien abductee for quite a few years. She experienced this black helicopter phenomenon after her experiences. So Tommy didn't report that, but he did report, you know, being followed by these cars and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. I have at least 2 or 3 people that came even before I was actually interested in basically gang stalking, before I even knew what gang stalking was. And they were telling me, and I was maybe 2006, 2007, and somebody who was basically what you'd call an alien abductee was saying that there were low-flying planes over his house. So I said to myself, well, he's probably exaggerating and all that. But again, a person that seemed very balanced and everything. And then a few years later, somebody else said to me, well, my house is flown over by planes. So 2 things. And then somebody, a researcher, they said that their house was basically sprayed by something. Their house was literally sprayed by a plane or a helicopter, to the point where they found substances in their garden. So it's and then that person fell ill actually through the spraying. So it's something that seems to be a constant, or at least that's found in a number of targeted individual cases, the presence of unidentified crafts. Now, we're not talking about UFOs, although there is an alien component. We're talking about unidentified human crafts.
Yes, I mean the other thing which I meant to mention about Tommy was he doesn't describe any of the craft coming over or helicopters or anything like that. But going back to the gang story very briefly, again, when it starts to involve more than one person, then you seem to have more evidence that this is a real phenomenon that's happening. And when we did the video interview at the end, I think I blanked out the video. His son reported that he felt that he was being targeted as well. Certain things were said at school which seemed to be very strange and seemed to allude to the fact, that these people at school knew what was happening to his father. And then he reported going into a local shop and people behaving very oddly, in the shop towards him, as if they were also part of this targeting, phenomenon. And so again, where does this all lead? The easiest explanation that people drop to is it's just paranoia. These people are paranoid, and but when you're getting more than one person involved, and we know that the alien abduction phenomenon as well is said to involve multiple family members at times, in various ways. You then have to really ask yourself, well, is this just group paranoia? Are these people all mad? And you can't really, I think, stick to that explanation for too long, because clearly there is something else going on. And then you'll get the occasional piece of evidence coming up, which seems to show that indeed something real is happening. And the other thing that I'm reminded of, and I think I did mention this in the interview to Tommy, or maybe before or after the interview, was the bioethics committee for the Obama administration. And I think if you search for this online, what happened was somebody in the Obama administration formed this bioethics committee to look at how certain unethical practices were being used on the general population. I don't know how this came up. Very unusual that it came up. And they had a number of public consultations about this in several cities in the US. And these were, like essentially public awareness or public consultation events. And they were recorded. And in them, you can hear people going in. There's people queuing up for the microphone, describing experiences like the one that we've described just briefly, of being targeted, of being harassed with voices on the phone, voices coming out of the radio, voices in their heads and stuff. And the number of people that are saying this, it's quite large. And the way that they describe these accounts is very coherent. It's not like they're mad. They're just ordinary people that have had an extremely disturbing experience, which they haven't been able to explain. They can't explain it. And like we've said, they go to the doctor and they just will give them a sedative or a sleeping pill or something like that, or refer them to a psychologist or something, or a psychiatrist. And of course, this doesn't help. Maybe even makes the problem worse. So I think, like a lot of this stuff, we are really left with just the breadcrumbs of an explanation. We don't really get anything out of the official bodies that tell us what is actually going on.
Yeah, because people have reported also, and you spoke about that during a television show, there'll be basically the presenter will suddenly start mocking them or talking about things they did the day before. Now, if that happens only once or twice, you think the person's mad or something, but when it's 3 or 4 people that don't know each other, that are very balanced, that describe the same phenomenon, then you realize there's something behind it. And what corroborates it is that American author Joseph Farrell, if my memory is correct, he wrote a book 2018, 2019. I don't remember the title of the book. I'll link it up. And basically, he was talking about the Mandela effect. And he was saying that some people had the memory that Kirk Douglas, the actor, had died in the 90s or in the early 2000s, and he only died in 2020, I think. But they were having that memory, and they were having that memory of Michael Douglas speaking, maybe in the early 2000s, late 90s or something, but speaking about his father on the television, a very moving interview. And Joseph Farrell, who's somebody that's a respected researcher, well, he said that he remembered seeing that interview. So that makes me think that there's really something that's happening. It's almost as if the organisms behind it, the agencies behind it, or the entities behind it, because there's a non-human component to it, seem to hack into somebody's television, somebody's radio, and make them hear or see things that the mainstream don't see. And that could explain some parts, not every part, but it could explain some parts of the Mandela effect. There's this mind control component, or this manipulation of reality, because they have the technologies to manipulate reality. That's what Carissa Conte, an American abductee and targeted individual, describes, how her reality was being manipulated to the point that things were materializing, and in a lift, basically, a pencil materialized in a lift to make her sign a contract to get her into a job she didn't want, and then artificial synchronicities. And that's more than mind control, it's reality being altered. So there seems to be, as you pointed out, something that alters the mind, but also reality itself may be a virtual reality manipulation of the 5 sense reality. I mean, who knows what they're capable of doing?
Yeah, this is it. These are sort of areas you end up kind of digging into. Just to come back on Joseph Farrell, I think whilst he's published some interesting material, I'd certainly take a proportion of material with a pinch of salt due to my own personal experiences with that author in relation to his involvement in 9/11 research. And I think, like I say, though he's got some good material, his primary goal is to be a writer of books that he can earn a living off, I think, really. And the other objectives are perhaps rather secondary to that. So whilst I take what you say about the Mandela effect and what he says about it, and I've had a chap that I know personally who's described a very unusual story relating to the Mandela effect, where he had an operation, and following that operation, he was on his back, and he was fine and everything. But talking to his friends and his family, he talked about this girlfriend, and having split up with her or something, and he'd been with this girl for quite a period of time. But then none of his friends or family knew about this girlfriend. Even though he was quite close to her, and they involved with his family at the same time as he was involved with this girl. So it's like he couldn't understand this. He found this profoundly strange. I know we've gone off the topic of targeted individuals a bit, but this may all be to do with reality manipulation of some kind, or
So he didn't
type.
know any. He didn't know. The family didn't recognize him.
No, well, they didn't recognize this girl that he spoke about.
Yeah.
He was just having a casual conversation that he used to know this girl, and he remember going places with her, and they said, "Who are you talking about? We've never heard of this person." And in situations where his family would definitely have known who this girl was that he was had a relationship with, and he said this was really weird, and that's what got him interested in this Mandela effect. And and yes, again, people talk about Kirk Douglas having died, or indeed the name Mandela effect comes from the death of Nelson Mandela, which was alleged to have happened, I think, in about 2015 or 2016. But Mandela dying, like in 2005, like 10 years earlier. So it's the same as what you said about Kirk Douglas and Michael Douglas, but with Nelson Mandela. So this is very peculiar. And I think when I read about the death of Nelson Mandela, I thought he was already dead. I thought I'd heard that he died as well, or I didn't. I just really thought maybe I'd mistaken the report for him being ill, for him having died, or something. So I didn't think much of it at the time. And I think the other thing that comes up with that particular thing is the way that the titles of songs or song lyrics or certain things which happen in a film and so forth. And according to what people remember, these seem to have changed. These things seem to have changed, as if we somehow gone into a different timeline. And again, that's a tough one, because how would you actually prove that? If your history had changed, how would you get the original history back that you remember? And how would you prove that it's not just a misremembered thing? And we all slightly misremember things, that we can't escape that. We do. None of us have, well, very few of us have eidetic memories. There's a tiny percentage of the population. So, again, is there technology which is manipulating our consciousness to make us believe certain things or think certain things have happened a certain way when actually they haven't? It's like you say, it's certainly possible when we've seen what else they can do, with this sort of technology.
Well, there seems to be a technology that manipulates reality and even objective reality around people, because there's this lady, and I talk about her experience in my book, basically, that's in French, not translated in English. But she's a person, very down to earth person, very well spoken, and basically she's had extra dimensional experiences and alien abduction experiences, and also gang stalking, what you'd call gang stalking experiences. And in 2019, she was with her boyfriend at the time, and her boyfriend or her, I don't remember, one of the two, saw that there was a medieval fete going on in a town in France. I won't name the town, but it's quite a well-known town in the south of France, and there was a medieval fete going on in the town. So they spoke about it with the boyfriend, and they said, well, let's go. And basically the day they went, it was raining cats and dogs, and they were listening to the radio, and they were saying, well, if it rains like that, it won't be much of a success, the fete, but we'll go anyway. And when they get to about 20 kilometers from the town, the rain suddenly stops and the radio goes blank. So they decide to continue. And when they get to the town, they have a wonderful time. The weather's really nice. It's very warm. The fete's a success. The people at the fete are really happy. Everything's really, really nice, and they have a wonderful day, and they about 6 or 7. They leave the fete, and the radio of the car. They put the radio on, and the radio's crackling. And when they get past the town, about 15, 20 kilometers from the town, the radio starts to work, and the weather turns suddenly. The weather that was beautiful gets really rainy. Again, it's raining cats and dogs. So anyway, after that day, they each go to their flat, because they weren't living together. And a few days later, they get together, talk about the fete, how wonderful it was and all that. And then they find out on the internet, and that's where it's very interesting, that the fete was not scheduled until 2020. And in the spring 2020, the fete couldn't have taken place in this dimension because all of France was under lockdown. And basically, they lived through that fete. So it's not a time slip, it's something more than a time slip. It's as if they went into another dimension. Very, very interesting story, and they both corroborated it. I met them both. They both corroborated it, and that's really, really interesting. And for the lady anyway, she was a targeted individual. So it's that there's a link between those reality shifts and targeting, and obviously targeting. I don't know what link it is, but there's a link.
Yeah, I mean, again, it sounds like a sort of virtual reality technology of some kind, doesn't it? Or being able to, you know, put people in a simulation of some kind and give them experiences which are not happening in the physical world, you know, and the rest of us are currently in, or appear to be in, put it that way. So, and that's one of the whole problems with the whole targeted individual phenomenon, is that it challenges your whole idea that everyone would experience the same reality in the same way, or basically the same way. You know, when they seem to be in these situations which, if they really were in those situations, other people around them would be going crazy, you know, and clearly they're not. So you think, well, is this experience actually happening, if, you know, in the real physical world, you know, and it's very difficult to say sometimes. You know, so if they are using a virtual reality of some kind or something like that, then you could argue that that is a form of directed energy technology as well, in that they're using some sort of directed energy system to create an energetic field to host, you know, the virtual reality. You know, this would be some form of energy, a manifestation of some form of energy, or a production of some form of energy. So that might be, you know, a way of describing this as a usage of directed energy technology. But I think also we've come across that in a more, you know, kind of basic or raw or brutal sense, in that, you know, you can fire microwave beams at people and cause physical effects like burning of the skin, or the sensation of heat, which, of course, we know about the active denial system, which has been publicly discussed for at least 10 years, probably 15 by now. And the US military have those devices on the back of a truck for crowd control, or for, you know, use in combat, depending on the scenario. You know, so you can fire these microwave beams at people and get them to move out of the way because of the heat. But there is also another area where that seems to have been employed. You may be familiar with Richard D. Hall's interviews with a chap called Barry Trower. And they did an interview a few years ago on the Rich Planet website. If you just look up Barry Trower BARRYTROWER, clandestine programs, which are using things like microwave beams to induce certain behaviors in people. And he, for example, discusses with Richard a series of suicides which happened, I think, in Bridgewater, which I think is in the west of England somewhere. And I should know where it is, but I can't bring it to mind currently. And there was a whole sequence of suicides of young men within a 2-year period, and there was even a video made about this, where one of the people interviewed said that he was potentially going to be a person who might commit suicide, and he said, "Oh, I'd never do that. I'd never do that." And then a few weeks later, he actually commits suicide, and very similar. It's very disturbing to talk about, but that in the video they describe how this person would lean forward while they were anchored to an object, and they had something around their necks, and they would choke to death. And all of these suicides were either exactly the same method or very similar. And Richard discussed with Barry Trower the idea that could they use some type of directed energy technology to induce a specific behavior in people, such as committing suicide in a particular manner. And he basically said yes, that would be possible from what I understand in relation to the black programs that I have some knowledge of. So it's all very dark and concerning that such a thing would be developed and used in the UK.
But there's a forest also in Japan, and Japan, it's well known. There's lots of U.S. military bases there, and there's a forest in Japan where people go in and they actually commit suicide. It's called. There was a film even made about it, but it's based on facts. So could there be those type of weapons being tested in Japan by the military bases?
Yeah, so again, you have instances there of like use of some type of technology to induce very specific behavior, and so and then you get on to, I suppose, sort of bringing things into a sort of current time in one sense, or a more time. If they can induce certain behaviors in individuals by using directed energy, is there other techniques or technologies to induce that in much of the population, such as, for example, the belief in a deadly virus that's going to kill us all, and the belief in a wonderful drug that's going to fix that? Because the way that people have behaved, seemingly intelligent people with logical analysis skills, they seem to have been destroyed in relation to what's happened with the COVID scam, and indeed the climate change scam, that anyone could actually go along with this explanation of so-called carbon footprints and carbon zero, which we say in the UK. This is just complete nonsense. Yet you have serious-minded academics swallowing this stuff, as if it's sensible, and well-defined and based on hard evidence, which of course it isn't. So that my question then is, I seem to have gone off on a tangent, but I don't necessarily think it is. Can we, possibly entertain that there's a technology which is being used to target individuals and give them these horrendous experiences and harass them and gang stalk them and all of that? Is that being used in a different but much wider scale on most of the rest of the global population? And I'd say, well, I think it's a distinct possibility.
Well, I mean, that's really possible, because I'm very interested in cryptozoology, basically, and in France there's quite a few good cryptozoologists, because there's basically the Dogman mystery and all that. Now, one of them did a very, very good work basically on the connection between the Dogman, other dimensions, the spirits of the dead, and all that. And he's a scientist. So he's a very open-minded guy, very, very good work, very intelligent person when you hear him speak. But one day he was doing this interview, and out of the blue, he was talking about basically his 3 doses of the G, of the V. Just like that, he was saying how he had his 3 doses of the V, and that basically, while it might cause him cancer in 25 or 30 years, but that it didn't matter, that he wasn't a conspiracy theorist. And he was talking about Dogman and Bigfoot, and he's a very intelligent guy, very open-minded guy who's so how could that happen? There was obviously either a technology or an entity or something that just made him talk a lot of crap just like that.
Yeah, this is it, and so some of these peculiar behaviors. And I mean, we've seen a couple as well where I think, again, you can search for this on YouTube, where journalists have actually come out with just random words and gibberish in the middle of an interview. And I think, this is most disturbing to watch and see this on live TV, where you have this journalist sort of just, licking nonsense, seem to realize it, and then they just click back into normal speech. A few times that has happened. So, again, what technology is being used? Is there a technology, or again, is it just, we've got so much access to video evidence from, video recordings from all over the world that we're now picking up and been happening all the time, which we just never recorded before. We weren't able to, share them because pretty much everything now is recorded. Anything that's broadcast is recorded in some form, and thereby you can go back to it and extract, weird differences. So, maybe it's an element of that, but that doesn't seem to explain all of it.
Yeah, because it seems to happen a lot. And also, Andrew, you spoke about a very important point: the link between gang stalking and alien abductions, and a lot of abductees are targeted also. Now, could they be targeted because they've had the alien abductions, or could they be targeted by the aliens that abduct them, that play a sort of a game with them, a sick game with the abductees? What's your take on all that?
Well, I think that's a very tough question to answer, and we're really only left with speculation. But I think, if people want to explore that area more, they can read my book, Acknowledged, and the section on alien abduction in that, because within that I talk about several cases. Leah Haley, who I've already mentioned, Carla Turner, I've already mentioned, and there are a couple of others. There's one, a researcher called James Bartlett, who I think is also an experiencer. He has kind of brought together a few cases which seem to sort of be targeted individuals and alien abductees, call them what you will. And he made some very interesting points in the articles of his that I read. So you can look at those. And I generally would, if pushed, I would say, well, it does appear there is some type of alien involvement. Who they actually are, where they're from, I don't really know. But I make the argument in the Acknowledged book as a general thing that there was some sort of agreement made with the Eisenhower administration in some form in the 50s. And not long after that, of course, we had the first sort of quote unquote classic alien abduction case of Betty and Barney Hill, which happened in 1961. And before that, it was like, most of the encounters were space brothers. They were here to help us and enlighten us. And there was very few, or if there were any accounts of people getting probed medically and have medical procedures done on them, they didn't seem to get into the UFO literature. It was only following the Hill abduction case that we saw an increase in the medical procedure cases. And again, is this just some reality which is manifested by human consciousness, or is it a real program which was initiated following this so-called Greada Treaty that Eisenhower signed in the 1950s with the grey aliens, in exchange for technology? I mean, when I read through that story initially, I didn't believe it, but having looked at the work of Art Campbell and some of his witnesses, you really do have to wonder if that's not actually what happened. And again, if we're being subject clandestinely to the use of alien technology, then that would certainly, to me at least, explain some of the really strange things that have been going on, really since the sort of 1950s and 60s, including all the last 3 years.
Yeah, because there seems to be this non-human connection between gang stalking and basically there's this non-human connection. There's also an American person who I've interviewed quite a bit, and he was a therapist who worked in the prison system, and his name is Jerry Marzinski. Very, very interesting person, and he basically says that a lot of schizophrenics or so-called schizophrenics are actually harassed by basically non-human beings. By it's basically the intrusive voice phenomenon, and he basically demonstrated that a lot of schizophrenics are actually victims of, or I don't like the word victims, but are basically, there's no other word really to say, but they're basically demon possessed by by entities that intrude in their thought pattern. And he saw that in the prison system, and he even had paranormal experiences with those people. And then he retired, and he started to talk to different people, and he realized that a lot of thoughts we have that are negative don't actually come from us, but they come from other entities. And he's basically spoken to a lot of people, done a lot of research. He's got this background, very rational background, and this open-mindedness. But when you hear the intrusive voice phenomenon, a lot of targeted individuals describe that. So there does seem to be a connection with non-human entities. What's your take? And with the cases you've received, could a lot of targeted individuals be targeted by technology, but also by non-human beings?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get that sense with the latest case on the YouTube channel, Tommy T. His didn't seem to have that kind of, air to it, really. But there was another case a good few years ago now where I was contacted by a lady, and she, described the symptoms of being a targeted individual, but her experience was much more like an alien abduction experience, and that she was, because Tommy, for example, doesn't report being experimented on or being held down or anything like that. The harassment that he's experienced seems to be, taking part just as part of his everyday life generally, almost like they've, modified his everyday life to include these harassment episodes. Whereas this lady that I spoke to, her experiences were happening at night, when she was going to sleep. She had the sense that she had an experience where men came into her room and started, holding her down or injecting things into her. I didn't record this. I didn't make a video about this because she didn't ask me to. Whereas Tommy did ask me to make a video about it, so that's why I did. I'd never make a video without somebody's permission and post it without somebody's permission. So so that was a big difference. So there seemed to be common elements, but the actual purpose for them being targeted, I mean, again, why would Tommy be targeted? He claimed that he suggested rather that it was to do with his local activities. He's a bit of a campaigner. He's standing up for the rights of people who are less fortunate, people who don't have any money, people who've been kicked out of accommodation. So he was creating quite a lot of trouble within the authorities, which made him think that this could be a reason, because he got a bit of a reputation as being a troublemaker within his authority structure. He wondered if that was a reason for him, being targeted. He doesn't say that explicitly, but he kind of implies that from his description. But what he said, he determined to actually stick to his guns and tell the truth about what was going on, that he saw that was unethical in his line of work. So again, the motive. One of the other things that happens generally when you say certain things are happening, whether it's to do with alien abduction or 9/11 or secret technologies, people that have not done the research will immediately ask what the motive is, and so that's also the question with targeted individuals. What is the motive for targeting? Why are you going to do it? And so that was one possible answer that Tommy suggested for his own case. This lady that I mentioned as regards alien abductions, why was she targeted? I have no idea. I can't even remember if she told me. Why was Leah Haley targeted? I don't think she had any idea. And sometimes people don't realize perhaps that they've been working in a sensitive position in their government job or their military job or even some other job which isn't either of those, and until they actually have a conversation with somebody and they say, well, I worked on this project of some kind, or I knew this person, or this person came onto my radar, it's only really through that they can then realize that might be a motivation for them to be targeted, to make sure they're kept under surveillance, or they keep their mouth shut, or they form a certain view about a set of work or research and not another one. And the targeting may be to do with trying to coerce them into that situation of forming a certain view or dissociating themselves from somebody or a geographical area. There can be a number of reasons for the motivation.
Yeah, because there are people. There's definitely a motivation. People they've been who are targeted have been former military and all that. But some people I've spoken to, one was a retired medical practitioner, nothing to do with alternative medicine or anything really in the mainstream medicine. Others were housewives and all that. So there doesn't seem to be a motive for everybody.
No.
And that's what makes me think that there's a non-human presence behind it, because when you read your book Unacknowledged and you read the abductees, you almost it almost looks as if the abductees are playing a game with the person that's abducted. When you look at the work of John Keel, he talks about the name game, like people that have contacts will have the same name. For example, in America in the 60s, there was he basically analyzed all the contacts in a year, and in 1 month most of the people contacted had the surname Williamson, and as he said, it's not a very common name in America, so they seem to play with names. They seem to play a sick game. Then they give people prophecies that don't happen. So I'm wondering if some targeted individuals are not being played with by aliens that are basically sick. They're literally playing with them to maybe feed off their energy or something like that. There seems to be a connection with energy harvesting, loot harvesting.
Yes, I mean, these things are all possible explanations, I agree. And maybe there are a range of explanations, like you say, depending on the particular case or, you know, both the person that's involved and their background or their, you know, their genetics or their employment. You know, it could be that they get targeted for, you know, one or more of those reasons or reasons we haven't yet been able to, you know, determine. So it's again, we're left with a lot of speculation and stuff, you know, and not much to go on.
So I know that you have to go soon. So one last question. What's do you think there's any solution for the targeted individuals? Is there anything that can reduce the frequency of the targeting? Are there any methods from what you've gathered to reduce the frequency of the targetings, even by not bowing down to fear, by not fearing the people that target them? Can they reduce the frequency of it?
Yeah, I think the methods that I've heard are really to do with things like you say, trying to get out of a fear mode of thinking, but also you can pray. You know, there are certain prayers which are meant to have a positive effect. And if we, you know, if we think about this aspect of consciousness, which we're going to perhaps talk about in another interview, how can we change our consciousness to influence our own experiences? And it does appear that it's possible to do that. So again, you need to try and get into this situation where you kind of know that you're a spiritual being and they can't break your spirit, whatever they do to you. And I think in some cases, once you really sort of come to believe and know that, you know, in the odd case, these targetings actually stop. And it also appears that you can request, you know, divine intervention, to use a phrase. It doesn't have to be divine intervention, to assist you with deflecting these attacks. And this can be done through certain prayers. I've certainly heard one prayer, and it's a long time ago since I heard it, but even, you know, it sounds crazy and it sounds maybe religious, but there was a couple on the radio on Coast to Coast a few years ago, and they were claiming that they were talking about more about demonic experiences, but they weren't that dissimilar from what some of the targeted individuals were experiencing. And they were invoking this particular prayer with the name of Jesus in it. And they said that when they communicated this to people and they tried it, that was very effective in reducing the severity or the instances of these targeting experiences, all these abduction experiences and whatnot, all these demonic experiences. So, in a word, start praying, start asking for help from, you know, light beings, angels, you know, the ascended masters, you know, whoever, and see if that helps. You know, anybody that's experiencing these sort of things, and you may find that, you know, try and go into the meditative states, try and practice meditation and being calm and still, and look at some of those practices and see if that helps.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that in the follow-up interview that which I'd like to do with you in the next couple of weeks, because consciousness, it's all linked, and it's really, I think, the solution for all those problems like alien abductions, even gang stalking, and even this cabal. It's basically to rise above them, to rise our consciousness above them. So, because basically we have a divine connection, so we can rise our consciousness, but they
Exactly.
can't. So I think that's really, really important. We get into that in the next interview. So, Andrew, before leaving you, tell us where people can find your work, your YouTube channel, your books.
Sure. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, thanks for having me on. So it's checktheevidence.com, all one word. And the YouTube channel is also Check the Evidence, so you can find the videos on there. Assuming my channel doesn't get deleted, we've been witnessing now censorship on YouTube. Richard D. Hall's YouTube channel I think recently got deleted. The whole channel is gone now, although you can access all the videos on his website, Rich Planet. I'm hoping mine doesn't go the same way, but you know, who knows. And but yeah, so I've got free books on checktheevidence.com. I've got, I think, 7 free PDF books totaling over 1,000 pages, which cover some of the things that you and I have talked about tonight. And so yeah, contact me on there. And any questions, any links that you need, I'll try and send those over to you.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and speak to you soon, and keep up the good work.
And same to you, Paul. Yeah, I look forward to the next time we speak.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.